Okay, let's have a look at this, shall we? Because this is also a part of this conversation. This is flowing into a conversation. We're now talking a little bit about, the vulnerable in New Zealand, and I've been speaking to the Salvation Army. I didn't come across the story till quite late in the day, so we didn't manage to get someone to come join us. But TV3 did a story on it. Both channels did a story on it. But we'll have a look at the TV. Oh, should we have a look at TV3? Maybe we'll have a look at the TV. Well, we'll have a look at TV3. 3 News, I should say. We'll have a look at the 3 News story about the state of the nation. Remember, and I'll say it again, I publicly said, I'll take a bet from anyone that the most vulnerable will be in a worse position at the end of this term. People are saying, you've already won the bet, Pat. We're not at the end of the term. I mean, Tinkerbell might come along and wave the magic wand and they might turn it all around. I don't think so, but it's possible. It's technically possible. That the most vulnerable would be worse off at the end of this term than they were at the start. Let's have a listen to 3 News and their analysis of the state of the nation from the Sallies.
No mai, haere mai, ma loi lele. Welcome to 3 News. The Salvation Army says New Zealanders are worse off than they were a year ago.
Well, that was easy. I guess I just won the money.
Food and housing have become increasingly difficult to afford. The charity's released its State of the Nation report for 2025, which found that a record number of people are receiving a benefit, with more than 400,000 reporting the need for welfare support in December last year. And the number of children hospitalised from family violence and neglect in 2024 was the highest it's been in 10 years.
Wow.
Food insecurity among...
So just thinking, 10 years ago, 2015, who was running the country then?
Yeah.
Who was the group that was sort of shaping society? Is there some kind of correlation there, I wonder?
I think there might be. Yeah.
I wonder.
Yeah.
Families with children has increased, and they found half of all Pacific children often or sometimes go without food, saying small reports.
They must be in that 8% of schools that Seymour doesn't really seem to care about.
Packets of rice, spaghetti and pasta. These basic food items are in high demand at the Salvation Army's food bank in South Auckland.
Really basic necessities that, you would assume in a first world nation like New Zealand that people have.
The Salvation Army's State of the Nation report out today says food insecurity among families with children increased sharply last year. Half of Pacific children are often or sometimes...
So here's the thing I want to know as well, and they may give it to us in the story, they may not. Why? It's all about the why. Why? Even Craig Rennie says to us the number of unemployed was always going to go up, right, for inflation to come down, but his thought was anything over like 4.5%. That was choices made by this government.
Yeah.
That's his position as an economist. So what I also want to know is why. Because even though I kind of get the gut feeling, you look at the times that where the vulnerable are getting most hammered, it's under a right-wing government, I'm not comfortable just going, I'm not comfortable doing what they do and go blame Labor. I'm not comfortable doing that. But the pattern is hard to ignore, Clint. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I mean, you're absolutely right. We don't want to point score of people suffering.
No.
But it is important to realize that the suffering is a result of choices that governments make. So, I mean, I was thinking about this in my head before. So they say quarter of kids are sometimes often without food in the house. So it's 250,000 children, thereabouts. The tax cuts for landlords, $1 billion a year, right? So that would be $4,000 per hungry child, which thereabouts would be
$80 a week.
Certainly enough to feed them the basics, right?
Yeah.
So these are choices that governments make. We can, I worked this out last year, that to lift every kid who's below the poverty line, above the poverty line, would be less than 1% of GDP.
Wow.
And governments choose not to do that. They can choose to make it better. They can choose to make it worse. And right now they're choosing to make it worse.
So what's that? 25 billion? Like is 250 billion about what GDP is?
So GDP is 420 thereabouts billion now.
Okay, so
it
40
was
billion.
it was about 3 billion a year. So no, it was 1% of GDP. Yeah, it's about
Right.
surprisingly cheap.
Right, yeah, 3. Oh gosh. So
Yeah.
landlords. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
So pay back the landlords or get kids out of poverty. Which is it, New Zealand?
Yeah. We these problems, like so many problems, are fixable, and governments that choose not to fix them are making a choice to prioritize other things.
I just think that's such a, I mean, they don't talk to us and that's fine. But it's just such an easy question to ask. And no one's, why are you making these choices?
Yeah.
Mr. Luxon, why are you making the choices of landlords over hungry kids? And he'll go, well, we're not. And I'm like, well, but if you think about like a budget and all the money goes into one pile, and all the money comes out of that pile and goes off to do things, then you are. Because what you're choosing is to not take money from that pile and give it to hungry kids. You're choosing to take from that pile and give it to landlords. Why are you making that choice?
Exactly. You know, and you know, I think the title of the report is food, family, housing, right? And that the basics: food, a home, family.
Yep.
So a home, right? You know, there's 20,000 families on the housing wait list. That's only 10 billion or so of additional housing at $500,000 a unit to build. So, you know, that's $1 billion a year. Again, like, okay, you know, throw around billions, it begins to sound like play money. But, you know, in a country, we are a wealthy country, over $400 billion of economic output per year. We can afford to feed our kids. We can afford to house everyone. Governments choose not to.
All right, let's keep going with the story.
Times going without food.
Pacific often live in areas where median rent is unaffordable. They're often in low-income households. They have the lowest disposable income across almost all ethnicities.
Stats NZ data shows the cost of living increased by 3% in the 12 months to December, driven mostly by domestic price inflation.
Hang on, this must be an error by 3 News, because that says rents have gone up and we were promised downward pressure. So I don't know, how do we get a hold of 3 and tell them that their graph's wrong? Because Luxon promised us, how many hundreds of times did that? Downward pressure. That's what he promised. So that surely that's wrong, Clint. Is that wrong?
More than that, he told us at the end of last year that they hadn't gone up. And they had. And, you know, this is why housing is so fundamental, because it's such a big part of people's expenses that when it goes up, when it's in short supply, it flows on to there not being enough money left to feed the kids. So it's all, you know, it's all connected today.
Yep.
The largest contributors were insurance, rates and rent.
Our focus has been on reducing the cost of living. It'll continue to be.
Now you need to say, but as of today, it's not working, Louise. You can still say this is a future thing we want to do, fine. But you do also have to say, as of today, though, we haven't seen that. That's an important part of this conversation, or else you're gaslighting, right? If you don't kind of acknowledge where we're at today, you're gaslighting. You can say this is our desire, this is our vision, this is our projection. We can't really challenge you on that, but what we can challenge you on is it's not happening yet, eh? So I haven't seen the end of this clip. I hope that's what she's going to say. I have my doubts. Sorry, Clint.
I was going to say, and like, it's all very well to focus on reducing the rate of inflation. That doesn't actually make prices come down. It just means they're going up slower. But also, if people are losing their jobs, then it's not that. Oh, it's not very comforting to know that inflation's gone from 3% to 2% when your income has gone down by half.
Yeah. Yep. Very true.
Obviously, last budget we did things like the family boost, which puts more money in the back pockets, tax reductions, things like that.
Housing is like the crux of everything. You know, when families come in through our front doors and we're asking about challenges, and when it comes down to financial hardship, it's like because their rent was unaffordable, or because, you know, there are challenges around the cost of housing.
It affects businesses too. After 36 years operating in central Auckland, Turkish restaurant Cafe Midnight Express has shut up shop. A sign on the door blames rent increases and City Rail Link roadworks. It all reflects what many of us have felt, that 2024 was a rough year. It's spelled out in Westpac's latest economic overview. Chief economist Kelly Eckhold writes, while inflation came down towards 2%, the economy took a very sharp dip mid-year. But we are now turning the corner towards growth, and there are promising signs of recovery for 2025.
The first thing is that our export prices are actually performing really well. So, particularly for dairy farmers, they're going to be seeing returns that they haven't seen in quite a few years.
But at the same time, US President Donald Trump's tariff policies are driving trade uncertainties. The economy is also grappling with rising unemployment and a weak construction industry. The Salvation Army estimates there are 4,000 fewer new housing consents than needed to match population growth. According to Westpac's overview, there continues to be a large amount of office space in development, and spending on industrial buildings is holding up. But growth in retail and hospitality development remains low. So are we really turning a corner in the economy? Kelly Eckhold says yes, because more financial relief is expected for mortgaged homeowners.
Interest rates, which have been cut quite considerably.
Again, though, if we're talking about the most vulnerable, the most vulnerable don't have a fucking mortgage. They're paying rent.
And they're not dairy farmers either.
No, exactly. I was just thinking that's just going to echo all the dairy farmers. And look, I hope you farmers do well. I genuinely do. I've got lots of friends who are farmers who work in the farming industry, but they are the national ecosystem as well. The people who are the most vulnerable are the ones who pay rent to the people who have the mortgage, right? And the people who, and sorry to burst your bubble about downward pressure, Mr. Luxon, but if the mortgage is then cheaper by $30 or $40 a week, I can't say all. I'm very difficult. I'm a very difficult person to make a 100% claim, but basically all 99% of landlords aren't going to pass that on because they also want to get back from what they've lost when the interest rates were higher over the last couple of years. So if interest rates come down for mortgages, good for mortgage holders, not good for the vulnerable, Clint.
Yeah, and the other thing is we're starting to see that investor borrowing in housing is way up, and that's not going into new builds. That's going into buying existing homes. Under the previous government, when you had the no interest deductibility, more money was being linked to first home buyers than investors. Now that's reversed, and it's really skyrocketing, and that's going to start to put upward pressure on the prices of rental style housing, which is also the houses that first home buyers often want to buy. So those prices will start to rise, and the landlords who own those houses will want to make the return, so they'll put pressure on rents. This is not like it might be very comfortable for this economist who's going and for you and me maybe to get a reduction on our mortgage payments, but for the people who are doing it tough, no, they don't see any of that.
Yeah. All right, we'll get to the end of the story.
Since last August, are expected to continue to go down 50 basis points this month. And those lower interest rates are going to progressively support the economy through consumer spending, through housing activity, through willingness of firms to invest.
That couldn't happen soon enough for businesses struggling to stay open and families unable to afford the basics.